You ever walk into a bank ready to hand them $50 million and get dragged out by security because you don't look like money? That's exactly what happened to DeShawn Ellis, the 46-year-old black CEO of EllisGrid Technologies, one of the fastest-growing clean energy firms in the country. On a crisp Monday morning in downtown Chicago, DeShawn walked into Evermont Private Bank wearing a gray hoodie, black jeans, and a pair of worn-in sneakers. Nothing flashy, just comfortable. No assistant, no chauffeur, no briefcase full of logos. Just a man with a confirmed 10 a.m. appointment and a cashier's check for $50 million. Evermont was known for its glossy interiors, silent marble floors, and tailored service to select clientele. But what happened that day exposed something far more brittle beneath the polished veneer. 5 minutes after stepping through the glass doors, DeShawn was being forcibly escorted out, accused of disrupting business operations. And 5 minutes after that, Evermont's reputation and eventually its stock price began to unravel in full view of the world. DeShawn Ellis wasn't the kind of billionaire who craved the spotlight. At 46, he'd built EllisGrid Technologies from the ground up, transforming a scrappy garage startup into one of the nation's most respected clean energy firms. His name was well known in the tech world, but his presence was quiet, measured, strategic, and rarely flashy. That morning, he woke early in his Chicago penthouse, reviewing the final details of a $50 million sustainable energy investment deal he'd spent months negotiating. The funds were earmarked for a multi-state solar infrastructure project, already greenlit by federal agencies and supported by a consortium of institutional partners. For DeShawn, the investment wasn't just business, it was legacy. This deal would fund cleaner power for over 1 million people, provide thousands of new jobs, and position his company at the forefront of America's renewable transition. The bank he chose to work with, Evermont Private Bank, was known for its century-old reputation, elite clientele, and polished discretion. On paper, they'd seemed like the right partner. Their senior vice president had spent weeks courting the deal, sending detailed proposals and promising their signature white glove treatment. But DeShawn knew that reputation didn't always mean integrity. He'd seen too many institutions smile in email threads and then shrink in person. That morning, he made a deliberate choice. Instead of arriving with a convoy or wearing one of his custom suits, he threw on a clean hoodie, a pair of black jeans, and minimalist sneakers. No watch, no tie, no logo. Just DeShawn. He grabbed his keys, declined his driver's offer, and took the wheel of his matte black electric SUV himself. A low-profile vehicle compared to his vintage collection, but still efficient and sharp. This wasn't about a show of force. It was a quiet test. He wanted to see how the bank treated someone they didn't recognize. Would they honor the deal because of the value he brought, or judge him by the way he looked walking through their glass doors? It wasn't the first time he'd asked himself that question, and likely wouldn't be the last. But today felt different. He wasn't there to prove anything. He was there to observe. He arrived 15 minutes early, parked in the underground structure without requesting valet, and took the elevator up to the marble-clad lobby. In his hand was a leather portfolio containing the finalized documents and the cashier's check for $50 million. It was a deal that could define the next decade of growth for Evermont's investment division. But as he stepped into the pristine lobby, flanked by glass artwork and the low hum of classical piano playing over the speakers, DeShawn could already feel it. The subtle chill in the air, the glance from the receptionist that lasted a second too long, the sudden shift in posture from the nearby security guard. He was dressed like a customer, yes, but not one they were used to seeing in deals like this. And as he approached the front desk to announce his appointment, he knew exactly what was about to unfold. As DeShawn approached the front desk, the receptionist barely looked up. Her name tag read Amber, and her professional smile faltered the moment her eyes met his. There was a hesitation in her tone, a thinly veiled skepticism, as if she had already decided he didn't belong. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her voice flat. DeShawn nodded and calmly handed her the email confirmation, signed by Evermont's senior vice president and time-stamped just 2 days prior. Amber glanced at it, barely processing the details before responding, "All of our advisors are tied up this morning. You'll have to reschedule." No apology, No effort to notify the investment team. Just a suggestion to leave. DeShawn remained composed, politely reminding her that his appointment was not only confirmed, but involved the largest single investment the bank had seen that quarter. She glanced around, then leaned in slightly. "Sir, we've had some delays today. It's best if you return another time." Before DeShawn could respond, the glass doors behind him opened. A white man in his mid-50s strolled in, loud and ostentatious. He wore a three-piece suit in electric blue, crocodile leather shoes, and a gold Rolex that practically screamed for attention. "Brent Halverson here to see about that platinum fund," he announced, despite not having an appointment. Amber's demeanor transformed instantly. She stood up straight, smiled brightly, and motioned for a nearby associate. "Mr. Halverson, of course. We've been expecting you," she said, voice syrupy with charm. Within seconds, Brent was ushered toward the glass-walled executive suite, where a tray of pastries and fresh coffee awaited. DeShawn watched the entire exchange in silence. He had seen this dance before. Quietly, he stepped back to the reception desk. "I'd like to speak with a manager, please," he said firmly. Amber's smile vanished. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside. You're disrupting our lobby." Within moments, two security guards emerged, one older, the other younger, both visibly uneasy. "We're going to need you to step outside, sir," one said, glancing at Amber for silent confirmation. DeShawn raised an eyebrow. "You're removing me for asking about my appointment?" No answer came. As the guards moved in, DeShawn didn't resist. With calm precision, he reached into his coat pocket, retrieved his phone, and began dialing his assistant. The guards took him by the arms, firmly but not violently, and began walking him toward the exit. Gasps rippled through the lobby, clients turned to look, employees froze mid-step, and standing near a printer behind a desk on the far wall, a young black intern named Maya Brooks pulled out her phone. She recognized DeShawn instantly. Her older brother had interviewed for an internship at EllisGrid. She knew his face, knew his legacy, and now she was watching him being dragged out of a bank that should have been grateful for his presence. She hit a record. No shaking, no commentary, just silence as her camera captured the moment. She posted it seconds later with a caption that would soon become viral. This man was about to give them $50 million. Watch what happened instead. Outside on the curb, DeShawn didn't raise his voice or slam the door. He simply stepped into his SUV, closed it quietly behind him, and made 3 swift calls. The first to his general counsel, the second to the managing director of his investment firm, the third to his CFO. "We're pulling the plug," he said calmly. "Transfer the deal to Riverview Trust. I'm done with Evermont." The $50 million cashier's check remained untouched in the center console. As he drove away, the sun catching the edges of the glass tower behind him, a different kind of storm was starting to gather inside. Upstairs, in a corner office lined with mahogany and awards, Evermont's CEO, Douglas Bain, was in a quarterly meeting when his assistant burst in, pale and breathless. "You need to take this call, now." She handed him the line, and within seconds, Bain's expression drained of all confidence. On the other end was a federal energy advisor representing the White House, an official who'd been instrumental in securing cross-agency support for EllisGrid's green infrastructure expansion. The voice was firm and loaded with consequence. "Why did your team eject the man heading the federal clean energy portfolio? Is this how your institution handles national partners?" Douglas stammered, fumbling for explanations. At that moment, another email hit his inbox. Subject line, "Priority, viral incident in lobby." Attached was a link to the now viral video posted by Maya Brooks. Less than an hour old, it had already surpassed 2 million views. The footage showed DeShawn being led out, calm and silent, flanked by 2 security guards, while Brent Halverson sipped coffee behind the frosted glass walls of the executive suite. Bain felt the floor shift beneath him. Then came the second blow. His compliance officer, flanked by the bank's general counsel, entered without knocking. "We have a problem," she said, holding a slim red folder. "Halverson, the man in the VIP room. He's under investigation by the Treasury Department. They believe he's part of a shell asset ring operating across 3 states. Falsified collateral, bogus partnerships, and a trail of check kiting going back 2 years." We have internal red flags on file from last quarter, but Thomas overrode them. Bain blinked. Thomas, your investment director. He overrode the alert manually, said Halverson was a personal referral. The words hit like concrete. Not only had they dismissed a vetted national investor backed by federal infrastructure plans, they had rolled out the red carpet for a man whose entire profile was built on fraud. Bain stared out the window as the gravity of the situation set in. Outside, the same revolving door DeShawn had calmly exited now rotated with a different kind of energy. Panic, confusion, disbelief. The bank had just rejected clean energy, national partnerships, and $50 million in actual capital. For a crook with a fake resume and an ego built on illusion. And somewhere, probably already on its way to Capitol Hill, was a copy of that viral video and a list of the institutions complicit in turning opportunity into scandal. By the time Douglas Bain reached the marble lobby, the fallout had already escaped containment. The atmosphere, once filled with soft piano and the quiet hum of business as usual, now buzzed with unease. Employees whispered behind desks, clients stared at their phones. The receptionist who had dismissed DeShawn looked pale and rattled, her professional facade crumbling under pressure. Douglas's shoes echoed across the tile as he strode in, hoping to regain control of the narrative, but the damage had already metastasized. The video, just 47 seconds long, had exploded across TikTok, X, and LinkedIn in under 2 hours. 10 million views, hundreds of thousands of shares. The caption was simple: Black billionaire escorted out for looking out of place. Watch how Evermont treats real money. Comments flooded in, public figures weighed in. Financial watchdog groups tagged the SEC. Evermont's social media accounts were in lockdown mode, PR firms scrambled, and still the view count climbed. At the center of the storm was DeShawn, calm as ever in the clip, saying nothing as he was walked out. His briefcase, containing a $50 million cashier's check, swinging gently by his side. That check had never been handed over, never logged, never touched by anyone in the bank's investment division. Now it was too late. While Bain stood in the lobby, desperately trying to issue a statement, the real crisis began to unfold quietly through back-end channels. Institutional investors, university endowments, pension funds, corporate treasuries began pulling their accounts. Within the first hour of the video going viral, a half-dozen multi-million-dollar clients called to review their relationship with Evermont. 2 more issued immediate transfer orders. The statements all sounded similar: concern over bias, concern over judgment, concern over risk. But the message underneath was unified. This was a bank that couldn't tell the difference between a visionary and a con artist, between prejudice and policy. Several partners cited not just the ethical failure, but the total lack of due diligence on Brent Halverson, who by now had quietly exited the building through a side door just minutes before federal agents showed up to serve a warrant. Bain watched the fallout unfold in real time. Emails flooded his inbox. Staff members avoided eye contact. His head of compliance returned with a printed copy of the red flag report they'd ignored, highlighting every missed warning about Halverson's fraudulent history. But what stung most wasn't what had happened to Evermont's reputation. It was the silence of DeShawn Ellis. No press release, no interview, no public rage. Just one action: a massive wire transfer confirmed by Riverview Trust, announcing that EllisGrid Technologies had moved its assets and investment accounts entirely out of Evermont. The words of the email were formal and concise, but the implication was devastating. A bank that had once prided itself on managing generational wealth had now lost access to a generational opportunity. And while Bain remained frozen in the lobby, surrounded by the echo of lost credibility, the check that might have secured Evermont's future was now just a symbol, tucked away in a briefcase already miles away, headed for a different institution that had no trouble recognizing the value of what had just walked out their door. By noon the following day, Evermont's board of directors had convened an emergency meeting on the 30th floor, behind closed doors and drawn blinds, but the outcome was clear before the first agenda item was read. Douglas Bain, once the untouchable CEO hailed for his risk management acumen, was quietly asked to resign effective immediately. His leadership, the board concluded, had not only failed to prevent a public relations disaster, but had actively enabled it by fostering a culture that rewarded appearance over substance. The official press release cited a failure in institutional judgment and pledged immediate reform. But behind the scenes, executives scrambled to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, the fallout around Brent Halverson accelerated. Early that morning, after an internal compliance officer turned over Halverson's flagged account activity to authorities, urged by a detailed memo from DeShawn Ellis's legal counsel, federal agents executed a warrant. Brent was arrested outside his Lakeshore condo, still wearing the same smug grin he'd worn in the bank's VIP lounge just 24 hours earlier. Charges included wire fraud, falsified financial documentation, and attempted misrepresentation of assets exceeding $10 million. As the story broke, news outlets paired the footage of DeShawn's quiet dismissal with images of Brent in handcuffs, a narrative reversal so stark it trended under the hashtag "Wrong Man Escorted Out." But perhaps the most unexpected turn belonged to Maya Brooks. The 22-year-old intern had gone viral in parallel to the original video. Her post, which had started as a quiet act of conscience, was now the subject of national interviews and morning show spotlights. But Maya stayed grounded, continuing to show up to work, even as whispers swirled around her cubicle. On Thursday afternoon, she was called into a conference room where a representative from EllisGrid Technologies was waiting with a letter in hand. The envelope contained a full-ride scholarship offer from the EllisGrid Foundation, covering tuition, housing, and living expenses through her graduation at Northwestern. Alongside it was a formal job offer, a junior analyst position at EllisGrid's Equity Research Division upon completion of her degree, with mentorship guaranteed by a senior vice president. When she asked why, the representative replied simply, "Because when everyone else stood still, you pressed record." News of the scholarship spread just as quickly as the original footage, sparking praise from across the tech and finance communities. Maya's story became a powerful counterpoint to the collapse unfolding at Evermont, a reminder that courage doesn't always wear a suit. Back inside the bank, staff morale plummeted. 2 senior advisors submitted resignations before week's end. Key clients severed ties, investors continued to divest, and as Bain packed his belongings into a branded leather briefcase, he paused briefly at the headline flashing across his muted television. Bank loses $50 million investment, CEO job, and market trust in 48 hours. It was brutal, unfiltered, and entirely accurate. No one had stormed the building, no one had raised their voice. All it took to collapse Evermont's gilded image was a quiet refusal, a viral video, and a decision to trust the truth over the illusion. In just 10 days, Evermont Bank's market valuation plummeted by a staggering $3 billion, sending shockwaves through the financial industry and sparking headlines across every major outlet. The collapse was swift, public, and brutal, dubbed by the press as the $50 million misjudgment. Analysts dissected the timeline, drawing direct lines between the viral video, the institutional exodus, and the reckoning that followed. Shareholders demanded answers. Financial podcasts, op-eds, and television panels tore apart Evermont's outdated practices and implicit biases, framing the incident as a cautionary tale for every legacy institution clinging to image over integrity. Meanwhile, DeShawn Ellis remained largely out of the public eye. He issued no official statement, gave no interviews, and made no threats of legal action. Instead, he quietly finalized the $50 million investment, this time with Riverview Trust, a smaller but rapidly rising financial firm with a public commitment to ethical finance and inclusive service. Riverview issued a brief but poignant press release confirming the transaction, celebrating the partnership with EllisGrid Technologies as a milestone in green innovation and corporate values. Almost overnight, Riverview's profile soared, attracting new clients and media attention for what many called a masterclass in how to treat people right. But perhaps the most enduring image of the entire saga came not from DeShawn or the banks, but from Maya Brooks. Her original video clip, capturing 47 seconds of injustice, was played before a packed Senate chamber during a national hearing on racial bias in financial institutions. Senators paused to watch the silent footage, the room hushed as DeShawn was shown being led out while a con artist was ushered in. Maya, now in her final year of college with her scholarship secured, was invited to speak on a panel alongside leaders from civil rights organizations and financial watchdog groups. Her story was retold as an example of how individual action can illuminate institutional failure. In interviews, she spoke not of outrage, but of responsibility. "I just didn't want it to disappear," she said. "People like Mr. Ellis shouldn't have to prove their worth just to be seen." The quote made its way into textbooks, corporate trainings, and LinkedIn feeds across the country. And while Evermont tried to repair its shattered reputation, the real legacy of that day lived in what came after, a wave of internal audits, diversity mandates, and new leadership across firms suddenly aware of the cost of silence. The lesson was clear. In a world where power often whispers, character still speaks loud enough to shake a system. In the end, what unraveled Evermont wasn't just a missed investment. It was a failure of judgment rooted in arrogance and assumption. The real cost wasn't measured in millions, but in the message they sent to every person who watched that video and saw a reflection of themselves being told they didn't belong. What DeShawn Ellis proved that day wasn't just that wealth has many forms, it's that respect shouldn't have to be earned through appearance or assumption. True leadership isn't loud or flashy, it's steady, it's principled. And most of all, it's watching how someone treats others when they believe no one important is looking. Because power isn't about boardroom titles or stock portfolios, it's about character. And character is defined in the smallest moments. Who gets the benefit of the doubt? Who gets believed? Who gets welcomed through the door? Evermont failed that test, but the world took note. Clients moved, companies learned, and a young intern with a phone reminded corporate America that accountability doesn't require a microphone, just a willingness to act. As the dust settled and the market recalibrated, one truth stood taller than any building in the financial district. Sometimes, the person you overlook is the one holding your future in their hands. And by the time you realize it, they've already walked out. With their dignity, their money, and your reputation. Let that be the lesson, not just for banks, but for every room where power sits and judgment still whispers.